So one of the models of persuasion is this thing called the heuristic systemic model, right? And it's based on this notion that the universe is so complex, but the brain can only process a limited amount of information, so we have to use heuristics or shortcuts to make decisions, right? Yeah. And one of the heuristics we use is looking at the human behavior of others. Because we say, well, if everybody's doing this, it must be the right thing to do, so I'm going to want to tend to conform to that.
Because you said something, I remember that I saw once in a Facebook conversation that you were having with well, recently you had this conversation with Russell Brunson, and you said something like, it was like you thought that life was about like just making a ton of money and then just retiring in the beach. And that's kind of like a lot of the laptop lifestyle and kind of like the dream of certain, like maybe many of us. And you said that you had that, you know, you made kind of like a lot of money, then you went to the beach and you were miserable.
That's right.
So how can you like help us in a way, or, you know, like even help the audience, like get out from that, right? To like maybe not make the same mistake, because I think that's kind of like the whole idea of like the internet lifestyle and the you know, and this type of like I will be happy once I have a bunch of money and just like kind of move to the beach and just stay there. Like how do you see that?
So the way I see it is this: is that is it's an absolutely toxic, pernicious lie that we've been all told. That's what we need to aspire to. That what we need to aspire to is greater levels of comfort. That what we need to aspire to is some point where everything is going to be okay, right? And we don't have to struggle anymore. I think that's exactly the absolute opposite of what is required for human health and for sanity. Because what happens to people when when somebody wins the lottery, what do? They get fat, they get sick, and they end up broke most of the time, right? I mean, doesn't this happen to almost every lottery winner? How many lottery winners, they take that money and go, I'm now going to turn that into billions of dollars. Does that ever happen? Has it ever happened? I don't know if it has, right? The traditional archetypal story of the lottery winner is they lose all their money, they destroy their lives, and they ruin their friendships, right? So instead of seeking comfort, maybe we need to seek a little bit of discomfort. Maybe we need to seek challenge. Maybe instead of chasing luxury, what we need to chase is advancement and improvement. Because I'll tell you one thing: life is not going to get easier as you get older, man. It's going to get aging is going to happen, no matter what. Now we're at a point in technology now where maybe we'll defeat aging. That's a possibility. But right now, in this current point of technological advancement, aging is inevitable, and there are challenges that occur with aging. And if your mind is not strong enough, and you're not disciplined enough to manage your body in a particular way, to keep yourself fit and strong and healthy and vibrant throughout your aging, well, you're in real trouble. And I don't think you're going to get fit, strong, healthy, and more advanced by sitting on the beach sipping umbrella drinks, right? What's going to happen is you're going to get lethargic, you're going to get sick, you're going to toxify yourself, and you're just going to die. And a lot of military retirees, they retire at 40 years old. A lot of them die within 5 years of retirement. Most people start their military career at 20, they retire in 20 years, they're 40, and a lot of them die within 5 years of retirement. Why? They're getting all this money from the government now, and they don't have any more challenge. Without challenge, there is no growth.
So they lost that drive.
Yeah. I mean,
there's so many more questions I want to ask.
Keep asking.
Okay, so one question that I really wanted to ask you is, you've published many books. You said that once you told me that you downloaded one book and like The Irresistible Offer. Yeah. And that took you like 18 hours when people, well, first of all, maybe they never write a book or they take a lot of time. And some of them actually hit New York Times bestseller and like the Da Vinci Code and and Amazon. And so what was the thinking behind it? What was the steps, the strategy of promotion for those books to actually get to that level?
Well, so here's the thing. So I look at it through the lens of systems theory, right? And every bestseller list has an algorithm, right? They have to choose those books somehow, right? So what you have to learn is you have to understand the algorithm of any particular list that you're targeting. So if you want to show up number one on the LA Times or on the Wall Street Journal or on Amazon, you've got to go in and you've got to find out as much as you can about that algorithm. So the first one I targeted was Amazon.
Yeah.
And what I started to look at, as I started to look at patterns of how the books were, and I started to form a hypothesis about how Amazon was ranking their books. And so what I said was, well, I mean, one way or the other, however they're doing it, you have to get a large volume of sales to occur in a very certain period of time. So the way we targeted Amazon, and this is pretty common now, a lot of people do it. There's a funny story behind that. I gave this theory to somebody first before I did it. They did it, didn't give me credit, but years later came back and admitted, yeah, we actually got this idea from Mark, right? So they did it and then I did it after them. But they were very kind to come back and admit that, that I'm the one who gave them the idea. And the idea was very simple. It was like, look, I see the Amazon list refreshing very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to organize a massive campaign where I get a whole bunch of people to promote my book in a very narrow time window and give people extra incentives for buying the book. So if you buy the book, show us proof that you bought it, and we're also going to give you X, Y, and Z, right? Now, all of that combined in a very short, narrow period of time stimulated the buying desire, right? So, one is like, look, you've got to buy it in this narrow time window. There's the scarcity of that, the time scarcity. Time scarcity is one of the most powerful psychological triggers there are. If you don't buy it within this time window, you're not going to get this bonus, or you're going to get it at a higher price, or there's something bad is going to happen in a short period of time. People respond very, very powerfully to that. And then there's the bandwagon effect, or psychologically we call it conformity to group norms. And there's been all sorts of psychological research done on this tendency of humans to conform to the behavior of other humans. So one of the models of persuasion is this thing called the heuristic systemic model, right? And it's based on this notion that the universe is so complex, but the brain can only process a limited amount of information. So we have to use heuristics or shortcuts to make decisions, right? Yeah. And one of the heuristics we use is looking at the human behavior of others. Because we say, well, if everybody's doing this, it must be the right thing to do, so I'm going to want to tend to conform to that. So when people see other people buying the book and they see the book rising up, it's like, ooh, that must be a really good book, so I want to buy it. And then there's another psychological principle, the psychological principle of obedience to authority, right? So when I have all of these authority figures that are all part of the same, sort of ecosystem of people, this same sub-market, all sending out emails on the same day saying, you've got to buy this book, right? Because I sent out, individual copies to all of those people in the beginning, so I would get endorsements. And so I would say, hey, look, I would love to get your endorsement for the book, and I would also love to get you to promote on this day. And then on that day, they see all of these authority figures out there promoting it on the same day. They're like, wow, like this guy is saying it, and this guy is saying it, and I respect this guy, and I respect that guy. They're both raving about this book. I'd better get this book. And man, I better act fast because, these bonuses are going to go away. And man, it's like it's shooting up on the charts. Like I check Amazon and I see it like, going up higher and higher and higher. All of these psychological principles kind of come together and they form this sort of synergistic effect, a compounding effect that makes the buying response even more intense. Now we could probably talk for a couple hours about everything that goes into the planning of that kind of thing, and there's a lot more to it. But those are some of the raw essential elements.
So what you're saying is it's kind of like four principles onto like the psychology will be like time constraint of buying. Like, okay, you can only buy this time, and it kind of makes like this constraint, right? Then of course people, it's kind of like the restaurant effect when there's a really big, like a restaurant, there's a lot of people, and there are people like go, like it must be good.
Nobody wants to go to an empty restaurant.
Yeah, like maybe it sucks, right?
That's the same thing.
And then so that idea, right? And then
or restaurant reviews.
Yeah, restaurant
This is
reviews.
the third
right?
one, right? Yeah. So like
restaurant reviews
yeah.
of like endorsements of like people with authority, right? And like, wow, if they read it because they're so important or whatever,
That's right.
they're like, oh, it must be good.
That's
and
right.
then the fourth one that you said is basically, if they promote, so if the influencer or the people of authority mail that, and they kind of endorse and promote your book,
Yeah.
that is also, it also kind of a bit of a social proof aspect also.
Yeah.
From that.
And there's multiple forms of social proof going on there.
Yeah.
There's authoritative proof. There's all kinds of interesting phenomena, that we can dissect. But the other element that's really essential here for people to understand if they want to make their book become a bestseller, again, is to look at the tactical portion of it. If we don't understand the algorithms that are being used to determine what book is ranked at what level, then we don't understand how to crack the code. Because if you sell 1 million copies, but if you sell them over 1 million years, it's never going to be on the bestseller list, right? Because you're only selling one a year. So the bestseller list must be, in every case, based on sales measured somehow over some period of time.
Yeah.
Right now, the hypothesis that I had was that it looked like Amazon was updating their list every hour.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'd better get as much promotion as I can in this very, very narrow time window. And I'll tell you something really interesting that happened that day. So on the day of the launch of the first time I did this, it was for a book called Mind Control Marketing, which happens to be about military principles and psychological principles as applied to marketing. It was like, hey, this was how I became successful in business without studying business or marketing, right? And it was ironic that I was using the same stuff to make that book popular. Now, the morning that we had planned the launch, I turned on the news, and back then CNN was basically like the only cable news that existed. It was the only news that anybody really watched. It was the news source. And this was months after 9/11. Now, you remember in 9/11, you may be too young to remember
No, but I
all the
remember.
details.
I think everyone remembers. I mean, if you were
were alive,
if you
yeah.
were more than 7,
Yeah.
I think you remember.
Probably, right? Well, one of the things that people remember was that Rudy Giuliani, whatever people think about him now because of politics and everybody's opinion, at that time he was the mayor of the world, because people were crying on TV saying what a wonderful role model he was during this time of crisis. Now, that morning of my launch was months after 9/11 happened. I turn on CNN, and back then CNN, every 30 minutes it was the same damn show every day. So you knew if you saw the news at 7 a.m., they were running that same show all day until the next day. I turn on the news and Rudy Giuliani's book was being plugged. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to compete with this? How could I possibly compete with a guy who's being plugged every 30 minutes on CNN? And I went to Amazon, and sure enough, Rudy Giuliani's book is #1 and overall on Amazon. And that was my goal. I didn't want to just be a categorical #1. I wanted to be on top of all Amazon. I wanted to beat all books. And for a minute, I was like, we got to postpone. But then I said, we can't. We've got all these people lined up. I mean, we have to do this. So I went in and I executed the plan. And then I said, but we have to do more because this is going to be harder than we thought, right? And we crept up, and we're we cracked the top 10, and then we're going up there, and we're at #2, and we're stuck at #2 for a while. And I kept thinking, man, what else can we do? And I would come up with new ways and new angles, and I would send like a new email to my list because I had a pretty powerful list at the time, and I would tell other people, I'm like, hey man, I want you to promote again, and if you do, I'll do this for you, right? And I mean, I was like, what else can I do? I would think of an idea, execute on it, and just go boom, 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 boom. I was just nonstop, and I was like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it. And it took 36 hours, but we finally cracked it, and we beat him, and we knocked him down to #2.
Wow.
And it was awesome. So the tactical part of it is also extremely important.
So it's like understanding basically like the platform itself, the algorithm,
Yes.
what goes on, what's the time frame. So understanding basically the of course, the nuances of the platform, right? So
That's right. And you know this with SEO,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is the whole like.
Yeah, mixing
thing.
like it's like I show like traffic principles and ways of thinking of traffic, and then of course you need the tactical
Yeah.
end, right?
And you have a hypothesis of how Google's algorithms work.
Yeah.
Now you don't know them completely, right? Because that's all secret and they're changing, but you have to have some
some type
basis.
of idea of what's going on.
That's right. Eric Schmidt famously said, and he said, in 2003, we reached a point where every 2 days we were entering as much information into the world as we had amassed between the dawn of time and 2003. At that point, we were every 2 days entering as much information as we had entered all the way up until 2003 throughout the dawn of history. But here's the thing, the rate at which the amount of information we are inputting into the cloud, into the stream, into whatever you want to call it, is also increasing. I call this the complexity gap. It's the gap between how much information there is available in the world and the amount of information that you can process.